So I came across a news report about half an hour ago, and it said over 1,000 people have officially complained about an interview that Kay Burley done on Sky News. So I wanted to look into this, see what it was all about, because I've got very strong views about the influence of journalism in this country today. So I wanted to see the context of this. The context was that she was doing an interview with Nick Varney, who is the CEO of Merlin Entertainment, and that owns Alton Towers. Alton Towers, for my international viewers, is a well-known theme park in Staffordshire in the UK. In fact, it's our best-known theme park. Big multiplex entertainment park. Um, anyway, a while back, I think it was about a week ago now, there was a big accident there on a ride called the Smiler, which I believe is a roller coaster. Four young people were injured, and one of the victims, a young girl of 16, I believe, ultimately lost her legs. So we're talking about a tragedy here for those involved. So it's a very serious situation. Obviously, that had repercussions for the theme park. They had to close those rides for the day, and there's an investigation ongoing as to what happened. And the young woman's life has changed forever, obviously. So my heart goes out to her first and foremost. Um, but what people are angry about in this interview, I can definitely see why people are angry about it. Kay Burley has once again shown that she represents everything that is bad about Murdoch's media empire. Um, to my American viewers, try to imagine Megyn Kelly on Fox News. Well, Kay Burley is the British equivalent. Incidentally, both Fox and Sky are owned by the same man, Rupert Murdoch, who I have argued before is, in my view, the greatest threat to British democracy, apart from ISIS and specific terrorist threats. But actually, I would argue it's a bigger threat because whilst terrorist organisations are a real thing and they are a real danger, um, Murdoch already has a presence here, like a specific presence, whereas ISIS, and other terrorist groups just want to have a presence. That's the difference. Um, I think people are naive if they think that there is no harm being done from Murdoch's empire. I mean, phone hacking should have woken Britain up to that. But anyway, I'm not going to get into a rant about all sorts of issues here. I'm going to try and be specific. And the specific issue I want to speak about is this sort of gotcha style journalism. And I'm focusing on Kay Burley, and I'm going to put a link to the interview so you can judge for yourself. She's not unique, but she is at the moment one of the best known examples of this style of journalism. When I say gotcha style journalism, what I'm referring to is journalists who allow their own ego to become the story. Just to be clear, I don't believe in a sort of robotic style journalism where journalists report the news and never ask tough questions, and they're sort of like they act like the robots. And so I'm not saying that journalists should never ever bring a degree of pushiness or toughness into their job, but I do think there's a very fine line in to what extent that goes to. Now, Kay Burley crosses the line pretty much every time. This woman is obnoxious, arrogant, loud, and blatantly full of herself. Um, I think she's a disgrace to journalism. And the thing I have about this is, just to give this interview as a context, it's what people were specifically complaining about, although there's been many examples. This is by no means an isolated case. Kay Burley has a long track record of doing this. So the interview was with this man, Nick Varney, who is the CEO of Merlin Entertainment. And she was asking questions about safety at Alton Towers. Now, on the surface, you'd think, okay, nothing wrong with that. She's a journalist. He's the CEO of a big company that has been involved in a major accident. So, on the surface, okay, nothing wrong with that. And personally, I've got no problem with any journalist asking a CEO tough questions. He should face tough questions. But the level of unprofessionalism that she showed was astounding. He was clearly answering the questions. He was clearly being coherent. He clearly was taking full responsibility, and he wasn't sort of making any excuses at all. Now, her response was to aggressively repeat questions, make insinuations based entirely on her own opinion. She was incredibly rude throughout the whole interview, extremely confrontational, like a police officer questioning a criminal, basically. And I believe it's a disgrace to journalism. And I really don't think Kay Burley gives a damn about the victims. I think Kay Burley cares about Kay Burley. And I believe that she is trained, along with other Sky journalists, to take on this confrontational approach because she works for Murdoch, which means that she has no standards. Okay, that's my personal opinion, but whatever. I'm not an anchorman, so I don't care. Um, if there comes a day I'm ever an anchorman or a presenter of a TV show, I can afford to be a bit more diplomatic. But I'm just a guy stating my opinion here. This is a powerful woman in the sense that she has a lot of influence. She is an anchor woman on a major news network. So she is in a powerful position. She has a huge salary, far more than she deserves as far as I'm concerned. And it's not about jealousy. I believe there are good professional journalists out there who have the ability to ask tough questions whilst also being civil and not interrupting people, cutting through people and insinuating. Now, some people will no doubt say, oh, well, what about the BBC? I'm not here to defend the BBC either. And for example, I don't like Jeremy Paxman's style. I would say he's well, actually, he works for ITN and he switched around different networks. He has worked for BBC at some point, I think. Um, the truth is, I don't believe there's any network that is faultless. But Sky, to me, is the most glaringly obvious of arrogant journalism. BBC has many, many, many flaws, but I think their journalists at least have a pretense of being a bit more polite and professional in the way they go about things. That's not to say that the BBC is innocent, very far from it. But I can make another video about the BBC. This isn't about the BBC. This specific video is about Sky and Gotcha style journalism. I'm fed up with it. And this is something that is exemplified by Kay Burley, but it isn't unique to her. There's quite a lot of British journalists do this. Dermot Murnaghan does it to some extent as well. And well, most of Sky journalists do this because they're Sky journalists. So I'm not surprised. But the problem with this interview is not that she's asking tough questions, it's the way she's doing it. She's not listening to his answers, she's interrupting him, she's insinuating based on her own opinion. And in my view, a good journalist will not constantly throw in their own opinion. I don't want to hear her opinion. Her job is to ask questions, not to insinuate what she thinks herself. So I completely understand this petition to have her sacked because it's not a free speech issue at all. She is in a position of responsibility and influence. It would be different if she was just stating her opinion as Kay Burley. But the fact of the matter is, she is Kay Burley, a journalist working for a major media network. So throwing in her own opinion crosses the line of professional journalism. Um, and I'm really, really fed up with it. I think what we have in this country is a generation of journalists, and I should emphasize here, I'm not talking about everyone. We still have good professional journalists, but there are far too many journalists out there. There's far too many hacks. I wouldn't even call them journalists. There's far too many hacks who are absolutely driven by their own ego. And I think it's because they have a huge salary and they think they're untouchable. They think that they can behave that way and get away with it. And sadly, a lot of the time they can. I don't think Sky is going to do anything to her. They might give her a slight ticking off. But the thing is, she's done very similar things before. This woman has a track record of bullying, a track record of incredibly rude interviewing. You can be tough, but polite at the same time. And the thing is, she doesn't have the decency to give civil responses to civil answers. Now, I am not saying that Nick Farney shouldn't face tough questions. He's in a position of responsibility, so yes, he should face questions. But she wasn't even listening to his answers. And she was completely insinuating. If you look at the interview, I'll put it below this. I'll let you judge for yourself, but in my opinion, that woman is a disgrace to journalism. And because she is in a powerful position, You know, we're not talking about someone who's junior level here. She's an anchor woman. She's a high level journalist. Um, I think that is a big problem. I am pleased to say that some people do stand up to Sky News. The MP Chris Bryant, to his credit, did stand up to Kay Burley. There's an interview of him online. But pretty much there's universal consensus on Kay Burley, and that is overwhelmingly uh, the sort of sentiments that I'm saying. You will find very, very few comments supporting Kay Burley on any of the videos on YouTube. Now, what does that say? It says that there is quite a widespread concern about her style of journalism. Um, I completely believe in a free press, incidentally, but the problem is we're confusing a free press with an arrogant press who believe they can say and do whatever they want. And I'm so sick and tired of egomaniac journalists who think they can play judge, jury, and executioner. Her job is to ask him questions, nothing else. Not to insinuate her own opinion, not to judge him as if she's in a court of law and she is the judge. Um, by all means, ask him questions. I've no problem with that. Okay? And I understand that she can't just let him give a speech. I get that. But there's a way to do it. And as far as I'm concerned, she's completely unprofessional. What a lot of people did comment on is Nick Farney managed to keep his cool. And he came across as a lot more professional there. It's the first time I've seen this man, and he seemed to be handling the situation well. He didn't come across as pompous. He came across as the way you would expect someone to come across who is the CEO of a big company that has just faced an accident. He reminded me actually of the way that Richard Branson responded to the grey rig derailment. Richard Branson, of course, is the CEO of Virgin a few years ago. Virgin Trains had a derailment in Cumbria. Richard Branson responded very modestly and just with the sort of humility you would expect of someone in that position. But some of the questions were just plain stupid, like, have you visited the victims? He said they're in hospital and it's up to them whether they want to see him or not. So he was clearly trying to indicate that he's trying to respect the position of the victims. But she's just trying to demonize him and make him look like a heartless CEO, which was completely unfair. And the irony of this is Kay Burley would never question her boss about phone hacking. What does that tell you? She has no morals. She's a News Corps, News International journalist, so, you know, she has no values. That's my opinion anyway.